Good morning. We saw it once again. More heartbreaking images of children rushing out of a school, their faces filled with fear, and of course of parents brought to their knees with grief after learning the children they dropped off that morning would not be coming home that night and would never come home. The May 24th shooting in Uvalde, Texas that left 19 children and 2 teachers dead brought us right back to the mass murder at Sandy Hook Elementary School on December 14th, 2012. Here in Connecticut, there were changes made in the weeks and months following that unthinkable tragedy. Stronger gun laws were enacted and police training was impacted as well. Here to talk about that is Danbury Police Chief Patrick Ridnour, president of the Connecticut Police Chiefs Association. Chief Ridnour, thank you for being with us here on CT22. I just want to ask you first, after Newtown, were there changes made here in Connecticut? And is that something that's been spread to all the departments that the Chiefs Association is dealing with?
Well, thank you, Eric, for having me. Basically, really, the changes in the training started after Columbine in 1999, where the previous philosophy was that you set up a perimeter and then you wait for the SWAT team to show up to go in and deal with the threat. That all changed after Columbine to where patrol officers on the street were trained to go in to be the first persons to go into the building and to stop the threat the best that they could.
And of course, we've seen that, unfortunately, in so many of these school shootings that have happened since Columbine and even since Newtown. And the idea with that training, I know, that changed after Columbine was that you can set up a perimeter, which is a kind of a normal police work thing you do in all sorts of different investigations. But meanwhile, children would continue to be at risk while you were waiting on the SWAT team. So what is the training now generally? Is it the first guy there runs in the building, you wait for 3, you wait for 5, or just if you get there, you go in and figure it out?
It all depends on the situation, but and generally speaking, the first officer there, if he or she can't wait, you're hearing shots, you got to go in and do the best that you can to contain that threat.
And I know there's research, right, that as soon as you confront an active shooter, that can very much change the nature of that. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because it may not be that it's a matter of the police officer having to find that person and shoot them, which may be what people are thinking. It's just a matter of being there and confronting them changes the whole dynamic.
Well, it gives them something else to think about. Whatever they're doing is now not unimpeded. Having those officers go in, now it gives them something else that they have to deal with, and then they're going to make a decision as to how they're going to respond to the police response.
I obviously don't, there's going to be so many investigations into everything that happened in Texas, but we have heard some information coming out about that. One of the things that was reported was that from the first 911 call to the entry into the classroom was 90 minutes. I think it's safe to say, with what you've said so far, that kind of timeline just doesn't go with anything, at least that the Chiefs in Connecticut are training. Is that fair?
That's exactly correct. I mean, I think right now, we hear a lot of different stories, but we'll just have to wait for the results of the full investigation to come out to determine exactly what happened there. You know that there's going to be a thorough investigation, a thorough report, and it's something that departments around the country are going to be able to use to review and to determine, to make sure that we're doing everything that we're supposed to be doing within our jurisdictions.
I know a former, I don't know if he was the president of the police chiefs, but he was certainly involved with legislation with them, was Chief Jim Strelacci up in West Hartford. And I dealt with him a lot over the years. And one thing he used to say was, if anything bad happens, it's the first sergeant that shows up on the scene that makes those crucial decisions. And you hope that guy is there and ready and makes the good ones. And probably that's true a lot of places. One of the things that we heard down in Texas was that maybe they were treating it more as a barricade versus an active shooter. Is that, it obviously is a big number of factors that have to be considered by whoever rolls up first. What is that experience like for someone who's a supervisor pulling up on that scene?
That's true. And actually, I'll even go further than what Chief Strelacci said. I mean, that supervisor should be listening to the radio and making, some decisions even before he or she arrives on the scene. We had a couple of, it's probably going back about 2 years now, a situation where it was called in as an active shooter situation here. And our sergeant, one of the field sergeants, actually got on the radio and made it clear to the first responding officers that if they hear shots, they have to go into the building and do what they can to neutralize the threat.
Yeah, and it certainly is so important, those first people on the scene. I wanted to ask you one other thing that came out, and again, everything is still subject to a lot of investigation, but one thing we heard is that the first people that went in were a Border Patrol SWAT team or emergency response team, and they got delayed a little bit needing a key to a classroom. Is that something that local police deal with their, school superintendents and folks in advance? Is that something parents should say, don't worry, we've got that under control here?
I think so. I know that we have an ongoing working relationship with our school department here, and I know that that usually takes place with departments throughout the state. So it's not something that I would be overly concerned about if I were a parent with children in the schools right now. That we're going to get in to get to that threat.
And just one last thing, what is that coordination like with the schools? How much training, just an individual, teacher in a classroom has to obviously be aware, I think, to some extent of what the responding police officers are going to do. So as you see these stories and they keep being in our headlines, unfortunately, should parents be knowing that there is that coordination out there and that that's something that helps protect their kids?
Oh yes, absolutely. There's coordination and communication with the school departments throughout the state. Teachers are aware of some of their responsibilities. I mean, obviously, when something really bad happens, you just don't know how you're going to react. But there are certain protocols that are in place for them to do the best that they can to keep themselves and their children safe until law enforcement arrives.
Just one more question. There's been so much talk about changes to gun laws and all that, and I'm obviously not going to ask you to weigh in on that, but does it change your response if it's someone with an AR-15 versus a handgun versus a knife, or is it more just find the threat and neutralize it? How does it change the actual response after a 911 call?
Exactly. It's just find the threat and deal with what you encounter in the situation. Whether it's a knife, a handgun, a rifle, or some other type of deadly weapon. Our job is to protect the people, the innocent people, and to take the offenders into custody.
Well, I think a lot of parents have seen this coverage, Chief, and wondered, well, what will happen if something unfortunate happens here in Connecticut? And I think hopefully that information will maybe put some minds at ease here in our state. We appreciate you being with us, Chief Patrick Ridenour, Danbury's chief, and also the president of the Connecticut Police Chiefs Association. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.